Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? It's tissue paper and gel printing. Yep, that thin paper works wonderfully on a gel plate. Even if you've got super juicy wet paint on there, tissue paper is still a breeze to take a print with. Now that said, you might think, oh, tissue paper might rip when it gets wet. Well, that is true, and you're going to find out in this video the little trick about it that makes it so that it's not going to rip when you take that pull. And also, too, it is going to rip on me. I'm going to rip the tissue paper, but it's not when you'd expect it to happen. Tissue paper can be very, very translucent when you glue it into something that you're doing, say an art journal, a card, scrapbook page, whatever it is you're doing. And I want to use the fact that it will go translucent pretty easily, become very thin and transparent in places, to my advantage. So I'm actually blocking off part of the gel plate here so that there won't be any paint on it. I'm positioning on here my Figments of Imagination masks that come with the stencil that have them cut out of, and you can find all that over at StencilGirl. And I'm positioning these on here to protect the plate. There will be no paint under them. Cool part about the gel plate is it kind of grabs the masks so they're not going to move around and paint's not going to get underneath them. Next thing you want to do is you want to put some paint onto that plate. Any acrylic paint that you've got will work wonderfully. I'm feeling the rainbow today. Probably not a shocker to you if you've seen many of my videos. And I'm just going to put a whole bunch of colors all over this plate. Once they're all on there, and now it's time to get them brayered around so that the plate has color all over the place. You'll notice as I'm doing this that the masks, I'm going right over them and they're not moving. They're staying exactly where they were put. That makes the gel plate a super fantastic tool for using masks and stencils because it does that thing where it kind of grips it. I really love it when my tools make it easier for me to do things, and also too when they make it so nothing gets wasted. The paint that's on the brayer, that's starting a background that I'm starting to really fall in love with over on that art journal that I've got right next to me. So all that stuff I'm cleaning off, yeah, that's already starting my next art journal play. Before I take the print, I'm going to pull up the masks here. I'm going to lift them up, and what's revealed is a completely naked plate under there. There's no paint there because it was masked off. Let's bring in the tissue paper now. What you do is simply place it right on top, and then to make sure that the paint and the paper is touching everywhere, you very lightly rub your hand all around it. I'm using the palm of my hand and I'm going very, very lightly. When I lift up, I'm finding 2 points at an end and I'm lifting up, so I'm pulling from 2 spots, and this stuff lifts up no problem. It is absolutely sturdy enough to use on a gel plate. I've got an idea for what I want to do with this gel print in my art journal, and if you want to be sure to see that, hit that subscribe button. That way you'll know as soon as I have a new video out, and you'll be sure to see how I use the tissue prints that I'm making in this video. There was enough paint on there for a ghost print, so you bet I'm going to take it. Just put another piece of tissue paper on there, and I'm lifting it up 2 hands at the corners, and I'm just lifting it up, even pressure as it comes up. Not a problem, not even anywhere close to ripping. But there is going to be some ripping here unintentionally coming up in just a few pulls. There are lots of tissue paper options out there, so why do I choose the tissue paper that I use? Because I can easily get it flat. I don't have to deal with the creases or the folds the way a lot of times you'll get larger sheets of tissue paper. This stuff comes, I believe it's 12 by 18 size, and what I do is I just cut the sheets in half. So that's what you're seeing me use here, are the ones that I've simply cut in half. You can use any kind of tissue paper that you've got, but if you're interested in seeing the brand that I'm using and exactly where I'm getting it from, I'll have all those links for you over on the blog, and there'll be a link down below for you so you can check them all out. There's a little more paint on the gel plate this time. It's a little bit juicier than with the last pull. And as I put the tissue paper down, I don't get it perfectly flat. So what do? You just lift up a piece and move it. It can handle it. It can do that. And as I'm pushing it down ever so gently. It just needs to make contact. You don't have to push really hard or anything like that. You just have to make sure it's touching. Now I'm going to live on the edge here. When I lift this tissue paper up, I'm going to grab it from one corner. Yep, I'm going to be a rebel about it. I'm going to lift it up, and guess what? It's not going to rip. But what happens though is it's more likely to fold over on itself. So it ends up almost like trying to deal with long pieces of tape. You know how they fold over on itself? That's the problem with using with one hand. I'm off camera right now trying to find a flat spot to put this because it is wet tissue paper, and if you pull on it certain ways or you poke through the wet area, it rips in a blink of an eye. Didn't rip when I pulled it off the plate, but guess what? While I was trying to find a spot to dry it, I managed to rip it just against a box that was sitting there. I'll show you what that rip looks like after I get this ghost print here. It was amazing to me how little it took to rip this tissue paper when I was over there trying to set it down, but yet when I go and I lift it off the gel plate, it doesn't even feel like it's gonna rip at all. It actually feels pretty sturdy. Part of that is because I've got that white edge around it, or that dry tissue paper. Some of the strength that I'm feeling is coming from that. So when you're using tissue paper, make sure that you leave a little bit around the edge that won't have any paint on it that will stay dry. And here's the rip. I can't believe that it didn't happen anywhere on the plate, considering that you're pulling up the paint and doing all that, but it was actually bumping into a box while the tissue paper was this wet. Well, I decided to put a lot onto the gel plate for this one, a lot of paint. I want to flood this, I want to make it juicy, and I want to see if I can make that paper rip while I'm lifting it up. I mean, after all, right? This is like absolutely lightweight tissue paper. This stuff should just disintegrate when it gets wet with the paint, right? Well, it didn't go quite as expected. It didn't rip when I thought it would rip. I've got a lot of paint on here. It's super juicy, and you'll notice it when I put the tissue paper on. You can see how quickly that moisture shows up, how wet that tissue paper looks. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to see how wet I can get this tissue paper and see if it would rip. So I've got it on there, and I decided to let it sit for a moment or two to really make sure that paper was nice and wet. Can you see how it's just slightly darkening up? That is that moisture going up through that tissue paper. So this is completely saturated, soaked. We have got tons of moisture on this tissue paper. So I was expecting that it would rip when I took the pull. As I was putting my hands on this to feel how wet it was to see if the tissue paper was strong, I actually put 2 holes in it just doing that. I figured there was no way this pull was going to come up. But when I grab those 2 corners and I lift up, guess what? It doesn't rip anymore. When you pick it up from a dry area, it absolutely has the strength to come up and make a complete print, even when it is soaked in paint and it is completely wet. So when you're printing with tissue paper, one thing to remember is that you want to leave some dry tissue paper around the edge. Basically, cut your piece of tissue paper larger than your gel plate. And when you lift it up, you're best to lift it up with the 2 corners. That way it's easiest to put it someplace to dry so it doesn't fold over on itself. So after this video, you now know the one thing that is super important to gel print with tissue paper. Leave that dry paper around the edge. That way you'll be able to easily lift it up even if you've got a lot of wet, juicy paint on there. Even wet tissue paper lifts up easily. And I really believe that when you understand what's going on or why, those little things can make a huge impact for 1, how fun it is to make a print, and 2, the kind of prints that you make in the end. You know, the kind that just take your breath away. If you'd like to know more ways to use the gel plate, if you'd like to know more of these tips and tricks, if you'd like everything broken down for you step by step so that you can fully understand it and really get the most out of your gel plate, I encourage you to take a look at my workshop called Gel Printing Fundamentals. It's an online workshop that's self-paced, and I have all the details over on my blog at colorfuljourney.com. The link will be down below. Thanks so much for joining me for today's play, and thank you for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.